Although I like looking back and seeing how much better my lettering and general page design has gotten, oof, this is a little bit tragic. Hello again team, it's Jess or JashiiCorrin and welcome back for another video. As some of you may know, on November 4th I celebrated my 4-year bullet journal anniversary. So it's been 4 years since I started bullet journaling. And as you can see, I've had a fair few number of journals in that time. In today's video though, I wanted to answer some of the beginner type questions that a fair few people have when they're first starting out. A big thank you to all of the people who gave me question ideas for this one, either via my YouTube community tab or over on Instagram. Of course, if you aren't following me on either of those, and if you enjoy this video or if you find it helpful, do please consider giving the channel a subscribe or jumping over to Instagram and giving me a follow there. I did actually end up getting quite a few questions, so this video is part 1 of 2. Today we'll be focusing more on the how and what of bullet journaling, as well as the questions that were more my opinion based, while next week we'll look more at the mentality/inspiration side of things. Also, if you have a question that isn't answered in this video, you can always leave it in the comment section, or in the videos that I put up each Thursday, I do a smaller version of this Q&A type thing, where I answer the questions left on the previous Thursday's video. Something to check out if you hadn't already. I will also add that for some of the questions we have today, I'll be referring to other more in-depth videos, so if you want to find any of those, they'll be linked in the description as well. Jumping in with our questions though. In general, bullet journaling is an organization system that can help you keep all of the things you need to do, track, remember, schedule, all in one place. The bullet journal is a catch-all for your tasks, events, notes, thoughts, feelings, and anything else. Typically, a bullet journal is a book where you write all of these things into, but digital bullet journaling is also becoming more popular, so I don't think it's really fair to say that it's just an analog system anymore. I tried to find a succinct definition on the bullet journal website, but honestly, a lot of what was written there really just seemed kinda like pretentious babble. No offense. On there it says though that the bullet journal is a methodology that is best described as a mindfulness practice disguised as a productivity system. And although to an extent that is true, since its release into the wider world, and with the ways people are using it now, it doesn't actually have to be that, or just be that. To me, and to many others in our bullet journaling community though, bullet journaling is still a great way to organize the busyness of life, while hopefully helping us to prioritize the things that are really important. I will say that, outside of the original bullet journal video from writer Carol, or the bullet journal website, a good resource to help you get started would be the video that I did a couple of weeks back now, called Intro to Bullet Journaling. In that one I look at what the system is, why I started, how you can get started, and the quote traditional bullet journal method. Well, to be fair, that really depends on your definitions of those terms. A lot of the time, the words journal, planner, and diary are used interchangeably, and I'm certainly not an authority on what each of those words does mean/should mean. Let's just say type 1 is where you schedule tasks, events, and appointments, while type 2 is where you write down your thoughts, feelings, etc. Then the bullet journal would be type 3, which, long story short, is whatever you want it to be. It can be more of type 1, more of type 2, or a combination of both. The biggest difference between a bullet journal and a regular scheduling book though, is that typically a bullet journal is just a blank book that you fill in yourself with monthly and weekly schedules, etc. This gives you a lot of flexibility when it comes to the way your pages are laid out. Typically a pre-printed planner will have one set layout for each month, week, or day, while your bullet journal can change as your wants and needs change because you're the one laying it out. There's quite a few pieces of terminology specific to bullet journaling, but going through some of the key ones, bullet journaling is the method of writing down your tasks, notes, events, etc. The bullet journal is the thing, typically a book, that you do your bullet journaling in. Bujo is the shortened form of the words bullet journal, so BU from bullet and JO from journal. You'll sometimes see people write this as Bojo, which I'm not sure if that's a typo or something else, and sometimes you'll see people refer to their bullet journal as a BJ, but rapid logging is the process of writing things down in your bullet journal. So one could say that bullet journaling is done by rapid logging your tasks, events, appointments, etc. Signifiers is the name given to the set of symbols used to represent different things in your journal. In the traditional system, we have a dot for a task, a circle for an event, and a horizontal line for a note. A key is just a list of your signifiers written out for reference, which is typically put at the front of your bujo. The index is also something that people like to put at the front, and this is essentially a table of contents. So it just lists out the pages that you have in the order you can find them in your book. A log is a page, part of a page, or a section that you write things down on. So for instance, a future log is where you write down things coming up in future months. A monthly log is where you write things down for a specific month. A weekly log is for writing things down for a specific week. And a daily log is, as you can probably guess, where you write things down for a specific day. Logs aren't limited to being time related though. For instance, reading logs are for writing things down that you have read or are reading. Meal logs are for writing down what you've eaten or what you're planning to eat, etc. A collection is a page that houses information of the same type. So for example, a monthly log is a collection, as is a reading log, as is a habit tracker, as is a list of movies that you want to watch someday. It's a pretty broad term. Two other terms that get used quite a lot, even though they aren't strictly speaking about the bullet journal system, are ghosting and bleeding. Ghosting is when you can see the shadowing of something you've put on one side of the paper on the other side, while bleeding is when the, typically ink, seeps through from one side to the other. Both are considered to be annoying, though bleeding is certainly the worst of the two. Of course, there are other pieces of terminology, but that is a good set to get you started. Getting started. The most common advice for this question is to get a book and a pen and just do it. Honestly, I don't really find that to be very helpful, even though, in essence, that's really how you do get started. What I think is useful to start with before you launch into setting up spreads is to identify why you want a bullet journal in the first place. Are you looking more for organization and productivity? Do you want to use this as a way to journal your thoughts and feelings? Are you looking for a creative outlet where you can be artistic? Or are you looking for a combination of all of these things or anything else? I'm not looking for you to do a whole heap of self-reflection and soul-searching here, but identifying what you want to get out of bullet journaling is a good way to figure out what pages you might actually want to start with. Another point is that when people first start out, quite a lot of the advice they get is to start small with only a few key pages and slowly add to that. They're also typically encouraged not to try and make things super decorative and artistic. As much as those suggestions do have merit, my thoughts on this are a little bit different. Most people I've spoken to with regards to why they got into journaling say that something that really attracted them to the system, aside from the idea of organizing themselves, was actually the aesthetics of it and the flexibility or range of different layouts that could be made and used. So it kind of goes against that to then tell beginners that they shouldn't use their bullet journal in the way that aligns with what attracted them to it in the first place. The artistic part and the flexibility part. The wide range of spreads part. Following that, my advice for anybody starting their first bullet journal is to try all the things. You think a reading log would be cool? Yeah, put that in there. You want to try a Year in Pixels mood tracker? Include that as well. Set up all the pages, do all the decorations, but please do this with a lens of self-compassion. There's a high probability that the first time you try fancy lettering or doodles, they won't come out exactly the way you wanted. If you set up a zillion trackers, there's a high probability that some of them just won't get used. But doing these things is a great way to start figuring out what does and what doesn't work for you, what you do and don't need. If you think that setting up all these pages and then not using them would be too soul-crushing though, or that you'd be too hard on yourself if they weren't perfect or not used, please do just start with a few pages that you think you'll get the best use out of. But as I said, trying a wide range of things helps us figure out what we like and need. When I started my first New Year setup, I put in heaps of things that I didn't end up using, either because I didn't really have a need for them, or I didn't like the way I'd set up the page. Maybe I was trying to track things annually that really would have been better tracking monthly. But trying these pages out was still something I could learn from, so I don't regret putting them in there. Having said all that, what should you include? Well, I'm not your mother, I'm not going to tell you what you have to do, and of course it really depends on what you want to get out of bullet journaling. But typically people in their first bullet journal like to have a key for their signifiers, especially while they're still getting used to the symbols, an index to record where each page is, a future log for any upcoming tasks, events, appointments, and then they follow this with any annual trackers, logs, reference pages, in an order that's logical. So typically either ordered by preference or importance. In general, I like the idea of ordering your pages from widest use to narrowest use. So you first put in the pages that will have the longest shelf life. For instance, your annual trackers and logs, like the future log, any long-term habit trackers or logs, really anything that you'll want to come back to throughout the entire life of your journal. And then after this, get into the sections for gradually shorter lengths of time. So next would be anything that you need for the quarter or the season that you're in, if you have any pages like that. Then would come anything monthly, then anything weekly, and then anything daily. People don't typically put all their months together though. So after your long-term stuff, you then have the pages associated for a given month, then the weekly and daily pages within that month. And then when the month finishes, you do the same for the next one. So for example, we had my longer term pages, we then have the monthly pages for January, then the weekly and daily pages for January, and then the pages associated with February in the same order, and then March follows the same order again, etc. Technically speaking, all you need to get started is a pen and a notebook. Most people prefer a dot grid notebook, but really you can bullet journal in any book. A general recommendation is to not go and drop a crazy amount of money on something that you might get 2 weeks into and decide isn't for you. But I mean, it's a little hypocritical of me to say that, considering that when I want to get into something, I really like to go all in. You know yourself better than I do, so make smart choices for how you are. If you know that you're certainly not going to stick with this if you're using materials that are subpar or aren't great quality, try and find a balance between not spending too much while still getting better quality products. If you'd rather trial the system with some cheaper materials to see if it's something you want to stick with first, go for that instead. The materials that I enjoy using are the Archer and Olive notebooks, the Faber-Castell Pitt Artist pens, Tombow dual brush markers for colour, a pencil, a razor, ruler. Sometimes I'll use washi tape, but those other ones are my main go-tos. On that note, do make sure to check out the description box below, where I link some of my favourites, and I've also got a discount code for Archer and Olive if you're keen to get one of their journals. If you're looking for some cheaper materials, a good replacement for Tombow dual brush markers are the Crayola Super Tips. They come in a really good range of colours, and they can be used for calligraphy style lettering, and they're much cheaper. Discount sites like Wish and AliExpress can be good to get supplies like washi tape, pens, markers, etc. at much lower prices. But remember to check the product descriptions carefully so that you know what you're getting. Also, it's important to note, you don't have to use anything fancy in your journal to get good results. Ballpoint pens are actually some people's pen of choice. For me though, the most important supply, and the one I'd be most likely to pay extra for better quality for, would be the journal. As I said, the journal that I mainly use is the Archer and Olive, which certainly isn't a very budget-friendly purchase. My other journal of choice is the Scribbles That Matter, which I use for my long-term collections bullet journal. You can find good review videos for other types of journals on YouTube though, and I do encourage you to read the reviews left on the products by other buyers before getting yourself one. I don't purchase lower cost journals because I'm able and willing to spend the extra amount on a brand that I trust. But if anybody has any budget-friendly alternatives that they can vouch for, feel free to leave them in a comment below so that our bujoers on a budget can find them. I only like to recommend materials that I've had first-hand experience with, which is hard because I'm typically the kind of person that will buy something at a higher cost, as then you can typically be assured of it being better quality. Doing a little speed run on some of the things that I do and don't recommend that I've used in or as my journal though. As can be expected, I do recommend the Archer and Olive journals. It is my journal of choice. As is also probably not surprising, I do recommend the Scribbles That Matter journals, because I've had success with those as well. I've also previously used a Dingbats journal, which I did quite like. The thing I didn't like quite as much about this is that the pages were a bit more yellow rather than they were white. But I did still enjoy this journal and would recommend it. The first chunk of my journals were the LT 1917, and honestly I wouldn't recommend these journals. The pages are a little too thin for my liking, the ghosting and bleeding that I experienced was abysmal. I know there's a lot of people in our community that swear by these, but they are not for me. As already mentioned, I do recommend Tombow Dual Brush markers. They are my coloured pen of choice. I do also recommend Crayola Super Tips, though I will say that at the end of a stroke on a Crayola Super Tip, you kind of get that ink dump happening sometimes. So I don't recommend them as much as the Tombows, but they are still a good, cheaper alternative. Just pretend you can see some mild liners here because I left them at school. I don't enjoy using mild liners in my bullet journal. I got them when I first started bullet journaling because they were a big thing. I think they kind of still are a big thing. But because they're highlighters, they have that ink dumping thing at the end of a stroke, which can lead to ghosting and bleeding, and yeah, not my favourite tool. The milk liners, on the other hand, these are a pretty good cheap alternative to the mild liners. You don't have the same range of colours, and they still do the whole ink dump thing, but if you don't want to splash out on mild liners, milk liners are a good alternative. Again, I don't really use them because I've got my Tombows, and I'd prefer to use the Crayolas instead, so I recommend them as an alternative to the mild liners, but not necessarily recommend them in general, if that kind of makes sense. Those are just a couple of the supplies that I've used in my journal previously, but if you wanted to know my thoughts on any specific products, please do let me know in the comments. A bit more of a specific question, but one I thought that deserved a mention. As you can see, in this journal, I thought it would be cute to have washi tape borders on every page, just to show the different months that were housed in this journal. But, as you can also see here, this added a huge amount of bulk to the side of my journal. So one tip would be, don't do that. Anytime you stick or add something extra into your journal, whether that be stickers, washi tape, tip-ins, extra pages, etc., all of those add up and increase the bulk of your journal. If you want your journal to stay as streamlined as you have it originally, make sure you're only using pens and markers. This really comes down to flexibility and forgiveness, as I have typically used my bullet journal as a way to organize myself and the things that I have to do. I appreciate that, given I'm responsible for setting up each of my layouts, I can tailor and change these to fit myself as an individual. I'm a teacher and a content creator, so the things that I need in a journal/planner aren't necessarily going to be found in any ordinary journal. my wants and needs also change depending on what period of the year I'm in. So I like having the flexibility at any given time to include the things I want and not have pages and layouts that aren't suitable for me then and there. In terms of the forgiveness of the system though, I just appreciate that if I miss a week, I don't necessarily have an empty spread sitting there as a reminder. In a traditional planner, where each week is printed out for you in the same way, regardless of whether you want it or need it, missing a week would then leave me with a blank section, which would kind of bum me out. The biggest contender for this question would have to be the future log. I always put it in, and I may use it well at the start of the journal's life, but this quickly goes downhill pretty much every single time. I probably won't put one in my next journal, or I'll forget that I had this thought and still include it. Another one that I found hard to use consistently was the monthly log and the reading log, to the extent that I don't actually include these in my journal anymore. This is a funny question, because if you had asked me even a few months ago, versus maybe even a year ago, my answers would have been different. A year ago, I would have said that my habit tracker, social media schedule, and weekly layouts were essential collections for me. A few months ago though, I stopped doing my weeklies, and I moved all of those to-dos and events into a digital system on Notion. So now I mainly use my journal for monthly trackers and other logs. Even some of those I could theoretically move into Notion, but I do very much enjoy having those trackers and logs done analog. So for now, they're there to stay. You'll already have seen some of the shots from my very first bullet journal throughout this video, but if you wanted to see a full flip through of this one, I do have a video dedicated to that, which you can find listed in the description box below. Having a look at some of the ones that I liked, and these are mainly habit trackers or mood trackers. So we have these ones from August last year, my trackers from September of last year as well, and my mood tracker of October 2018. In terms of a layout that I really didn't like, this one is the one that first came to mind, mainly just because it didn't fit with the rest of the month. For the rest of the month I had these little paper bag headers, which were actually really cute, and then I didn't have one for this page, so I thought, oh yeah, I'll just use some washi and stickers. And I hated it. In this journal, I also tried to use the same layout for every day in April, and although at the start I really enjoyed it, towards the end I kind of just got sick of having to do the same thing every single day, so these ones didn't get filled out quite as well. My favourite way to fix mistakes in my journal is to 1. Cover them with something else, whether that be a sticker or a piece of paper from the back of my journal, etc. 2. Go over them with a box of the same colour or a darker colour, depending on what will work better for my spread. If I then want to write over this, I'll often use a white gel pen or another colour gel pen. Or 3, go over the mistake area with a white gel pen, kind of like whiteout or correction fluid. To be honest though, a lot of the time I just don't. I'll either make the mistake part of the spread, like I did in this example here, though I was really just lucky it was April 1st. Or for smaller mistakes, I'll just leave them in. A lot of the time I find that trying to correct a smaller mistake draws more attention to it than just leaving it be. The best piece of advice I've ever received for bullet journaling, and the one that I will always give to others, is to make it yours. Although I do have to remind myself of this a lot, especially when I want to do things that go against the grain, whether that be eliminating pages that others deem essential, or doing monthly themes that aren't suitable for the time of year that most people in our community are in. Making my system and my bullet journal work for my wants and needs is important, and I really hope that if you guys are bullet journaling, that you make yours work for you. You want to make it super simple or even a little bit messy? Heck yeah, you do that. You want to have super artistic spreads and use a bunch of different media? Awesome, you do that. You want to have one page be super minimalistic and monochrome, and then turn the page and have a full-blown explosion of colour? I love that for you. You do that. We want this system to work for you. We want it to be something you enjoy and find useful. Please do make it your own. As I mentioned at the start, you guys really came through with the questions, so make sure not to miss out on next week's part 2 to this video, where we look more at the mentality type questions, those about finding inspiration, how to get artsy, all that jazz. I hope you found this video interesting or insightful, and as always, thank you for watching, team. If you liked today's video, please do make sure to give it a big thumbs up, and if you wanted to see more from me, feel free to go check out one of my other videos. Until next time, bye!